Hello and welcome. This is our little discussion about what is the cloud. First of all, it's not a cloud. It's actually bunches of computers ran by the various tech companies. And we're talking about warehouses full of computers or buildings full of computers. These computers, by the way, are usually referred to as cloud servers. The definition of the cloud is cloud computing is the on-demand availability of computer system resources, especially data storage and computing power, without direct active management by the user. The term is generally used to describe data centers available to many users over the internet. Now, if that didn't make any sense, that's absolutely fine. We'll try to simplify this a little bit. Now, back in the good old days, and that's when, we're talking when computers initially started moving into business, what you'd have is something called a mainframe computer. And you'd have people sitting at terminals and they'd be inputting the data that would go into this big central mainframe. In the recent old days, and we're talking like, 30, 40 years ago, if you worked in an office, very often if you had to share information between one computer and another, you could email it to another person, or you could put it on a floppy diskette and take it to somebody else. But very often in an office, what they would do is they'd set up a computer or maybe a few computers, and they'd be called server computers. And what would happen is if you had a computer file that you needed to share with other people, especially if the other people were kind of distant from you on other floors or even in other buildings or in other parts of the country, what you'd be told to do is put the file on the server. And the servers were like information warehouses, and they simply served out the data to other people. And the advantage of storing your data not on your own computer, but putting it into a server is not only was it shareable, but it made it easier for the IT staff to back up the data and to manage the data and grant permission to certain people to do certain things. So you had more control over the data and it was protected. If people chose to keep data on their own computers, it was left up to them to back up the data in case the computer went haywire for some reason. Now, this server idea is basically what evolved into the cloud. So nowadays, what we find is although companies will still have servers within their buildings, nowadays a lot of things have moved to cloud servers. So, for instance, a company may not have servers of their very own. What they might do is they may instead choose to use Google or Microsoft and use their computers instead as a way of storing their data. Now, for you as a regular person, the way this affects you is when you buy a device like a tablet or a phone or even your laptop or desktop computer, you now have the capability to use cloud storage as additional storage to what you get on the device itself. So for instance, on my phone that I buy, I might only have, 16 gigabytes of memory. And, that's a fair amount. There's nothing wrong with that. But when I set up the phone, I might also be granted cloud storage space, which can often double the amount of memory I now have access to. So here's a little example. The Google Drive's a good example of this. So let's say I buy an Android phone. Android is the operating system that runs the phone. It's the programming that runs the phone. When I set up an Android phone, very often, if I don't already have one, I have to set up a Gmail account, which is in fact what we call a Google account. So when you set up your phone and you set up your Google account, that grants you access to the Google Drive. And the Google Drive has 15 gigabytes of space in it. So it stores your Gmail. If you set up your phone to back up your photos, it backs up your photos into the cloud. So if your phone goes missing or gets damaged, you have a copy of your photos somewhere else. And in addition, the Google Drive gives you for free these things called the Google Apps, which is, Google Docs, Sheets, and Slides that are kind of like a replacement for Microsoft. So if you don't want to pay, any fee for using Microsoft Office, you might find that Google Docs is a very suitable replacement. Now, the important thing is that if I set up my Android phone with a Google account and I have a tablet, I can also sign that tablet into the same Google account, and then all of a sudden, your phone and your tablet have access to the same storehouse of information that is stored up in the Google Drive. Similarly, I can sign into my Google Drive from my computer and see what information I've stored up into my Google Drive. So the idea is kind of that by using the cloud, I can store my information up into the cloud, and it's accessible by any device I have that has an internet connection and that I can use to sign into the cloud through my Google account. Now, I can still store stuff on my computer if I wish to do that, but keep in mind, if you store stuff on your computer or your phone or your tablet on the resident memory in that device, you have to make sure that you back up the data yourself. Whereas stuff stored in the cloud gets backed up by another set of computers. So it's not impossible to lose data out of the cloud. I'm sure it has happened, but often the cloud is backed up by other devices. So even if you forget to back up your device, anything stored in the cloud will still be there. The other advantage is if I store my material up in the cloud, if I switch from one phone to another, the moment I sign back into the same Google account with my phone, any of the data that's in the cloud that I've stored there is available to that phone or that device. And what makes this even crazier is that I can have a Google Drive account, but I can also download an app to, say, an iPhone or an iPad and access whatever material is in my Google account through that device as well. It's not specific to the device. Now, when it comes to cloud storage, there's all sorts of storage services out there. So for instance, you may have heard of a service called Dropbox, and you can sign up for that for free. And the thing about Dropbox is that used to be used quite a bit in the event that I had an email attachment that was too big to email, like the email service wouldn't let me email it. What I could then do is upload that big file to Dropbox and instead send out what's called a link or a share link to someone. They could click the link and see the file in Dropbox. So it was a way of getting around email storage limitations. That was, or email attachment limitations is more precise. Of course, Dropbox is used for any other things, but again, it refers to a storage place online where you could put larger files. Now, as mentioned previously, if I buy a device that runs Android as its operating system, one of the things I will be required to do when I set it up is usually create or use a Gmail account or a Google account, and that grants me access to the Google Drive and all the apps within it. So I get online storage space and some apps I can use, and honestly, there's a whole ton of apps available in the Google Drive that you may want to take a look at if you're interested. If I have Windows 10, you might see an entry in the File Explorer for a thing called the OneDrive. And the OneDrive is Microsoft's little cloud. And in addition, if I have Windows 10 and I have a Microsoft account, which is usually used to set up Windows 10 when I first get it going on my computer, or if I have an Outlook.com, or even way back when, even if I have a Hotmail account, that also gives me access to the OneDrive. And much like the Google Drive, it's online storage, so I can upload files there to store them and make them available to all my other digital devices. And the OneDrive also has kind of trimmed down web versions of Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint if you're interested in using those online. For Apple users, they're online cloud storage area is known as the iCloud. And the iCloud, again, has apps in it like a trimmed down version of, uh, I believe it's Apple Sheets, as well, I think it's Numbers, and their presentation program is known as Keynote. So again, the iCloud gives you storage there, and iCloud also gives an email service of its own. So if you've ever seen an email coming in from somebody at iCloud.com, that's part of the email service that iCloud grants you as well. And as well, there are many independent cloud storage companies out there, and some of these will promise like greater online security and all of those sorts of things. As for cloud storage, I often get asked, is it safe? Well, you take a risk with anything you use online. I believe that all of these companies do their level best to keep the material that's online kept safe. Just keep in mind, if you don't want to use cloud storage, that's your right too. If you want to store everything on your own computer or your own device, that's fine. But it's up to you then to make sure that you back up your data regularly to another storage device, like an external drive, for instance. And even if you are using cloud storage, I still do back up my data to an external drive just because backing it up to a couple different places really ensures that if something goes wrong, I always have access to the data I need. Now, another thing we didn't talk about very much is the idea of cloud computing. And just quickly to talk about it, cloud computing is what allows massive companies like Amazon to operate. And Amazon, if you don't know what it is, it's the company that everybody seems to be buying from nowadays. Department stores are starting to go out of business because people are buying stuff through Amazon and getting it delivered to their door. Amazon also runs a lot of these data centers and rents out space, cloud computing space, so other companies can make use of it. Now, the organizations that make use of cloud computing, the actual power of computing, using masses of computers to do digital data analysis, include things like medical and scientific organizations. So universities and medical labs and scientific organizations use cloud computing to go through piles of information. And that's why we start to see more and more medical and scientific breakthroughs happening quicker, because all of these computers are doing data analysis 24/7 to bring us answers to move, into things like finding medicines. It also, in a very basic way, allows us to use things like those doorbell and security cameras. So even though I can see what's happening through my doorbell camera on my phone, the recordings being recorded most often are being kept up in the cloud, and that's where they get stored, and that's where I can review them from. In time, the cloud will also be used to manage self-driving cars and other technological advances. And you better believe it, self-driving cars and self-driving transport trucks are on the way. But for now, we regular folks just use the cloud to keep our data available and handy. So in short, the cloud is a way I can upload information from any digital device I have in order to share it with other digital devices that use the same account, and to make my data available to me 24/7. If you have any other questions about the cloud or cloud services, or any questions related to technical training, please feel free to check out my website at www.gruntmulti.com. That's GRUNTMULTI.com. Hope to see you there. Thanks very much.